Good afternoon, scaredy cats. Hope you enjoy the video today and please like, comment, and subscribe. Today's shout out goes to Jess Gaudette. Thanks for your support. Nunchucks. When my daughter was 2, I found her twirling paper towel tubes, tied with twine, in the air. I asked her what she was doing. She said she was practicing her nunchucks. I was very confused as she'd have no way of knowing what they were. I asked her what she meant and she said that Adam had told her how to make them and showed her each night how to use them. She went on to say that Adam told her to practice because she may need to know how to defend herself someday. I almost freaked out, but asked her what Adam looked like. She said he was tall, blonde, and had blue eyes. She said, "Mommy, you know how he looks, you know him. He died of a headache." I had to leave the room. You see, 4 months before she was born, my tall, blonde, blue-eyed, martial arts pro friend had died of a brain aneurysm at the age of 27. She has not spoken of him since that day, so I'm not sure if I scared her with my reaction or if she had completed her lessons. Hole in the wall. There was a young man who started college in a big city. He didn't have much money, so the only place he could afford to rent was in an old, run-down apartment building that was in a bad area of the city. When he moved in, he found that the apartment was in a bad state of repair. The floor was dusty and stained, the furniture was falling apart, and the wallpaper was peeling off the walls. After unpacking his belongings, he decided to try and tidy up the apartment a lit. As he was tearing off a piece of peeling wallpaper, he happened to uncover a small hole in the wall. Peeking through the hole, he discovered that he could see into his neighbor's apartment. There was nobody home, so he just plugged up the hole with some tissue paper and set about dusting and cleaning the place. The next evening, when he came home from college, he got into the elevator and a beautiful woman stepped in after him. As they ascended, the man couldn't take his eyes off the young woman's shapely legs and generous curves. The elevator stopped on his floor and he got out. He was surprised to see the woman was following him. He walked down the corridor and when he reached his apartment, he looked over his shoulder. The young woman was opening the door of the apartment next to his. He realized that she was his neighbor. Once inside his apartment, the young man couldn't stop thinking about the beautiful woman next door. Unable to resist the temptation, he decided to take a peek through the hole in the wall. When he put his eye up to the hole and peeked in, he had a perfect view of the entire apartment. He was shocked when he saw the woman start taking off her clothes and preparing to take a shower. The woman apparently wasn't aware of the peephole, so the young man kept quiet and watched her undress. He couldn't believe his luck and was disappointed when she turned off the lights and went to bed. In the middle of the night, the young man woke up to the sound of groaning coming from the apartment next door. He wondered what it was and decided to look through the hole in the wall. He was horrified by what he saw. There was a tall man standing over the young woman. He held a long, thin knife in his hand and kept stabbing her over and over. The young woman was groaning in pain and lay in a pool of blood. The young man was so shocked by the scene before him that he couldn't move a muscle. His knees felt weak and his stomach churned. Before the college student had a chance to think, the tall man delivered one last blow and the groan ceased. The woman was dead. The murderer grabbed some things and made his way out of the apartment. As he was closing the apartment door behind him, the killer turned and the young man got a good look at his face. He had a thin nose, a dark beard, and a long scar on the side of his cheek. He would be easy to identify. The young man ran into his bedroom and grabbed his mobile phone. He was about to call the police when he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He held the phone in his trembling hands as his mind began to race. If he reported this to the police, they would find out that he had been spying on the woman through the hole in the wall. His neighbors would find out about it. His friends and family would find out. What would they say? What would they think of him? He would be embarrassed beyond belief. Slowly, he placed the phone on his bedside table and sat down. He never called the police. The next evening, when the young man returned from college, the police were waiting at his door. They told him that his next-door neighbor had been murdered during the night and said they needed to ask him some questions. He tried to keep them talking in the corridor, but they invited themselves into his apartment. Sitting at the kitchen table, the policeman asked him if he had seen or heard anything unusual the night before. The young man began to sweat profusely. He told them he had gone to bed early and must have slept through the whole thing. They asked him a few more questions, but he denied knowing anything about the murder. Just then, one of the policemen noticed the hole in the wall. He got up from the table and peered through it. "Are you sure you didn't see anything?" he asked suspiciously. "I just moved into this apartment 2 days ago," said the young man, his voice shaking. "I didn't even realize there was a hole in the wall. I swear to you, I didn't see or hear anything. If I did, I would tell you." The policeman eventually grew tired of questioning him and, as they said their goodbyes and left, it seemed as if they believed his story. The young man couldn't forget having witnessed the terrible murder, but the guilt of not reporting it to the police quickly evaporated and he tried to get on with his life. A week passed and the young man gradually forgot about the murder. He blocked up the hole in the wall with paper, not wanting to be reminded of the terrible crime. He also installed new locks and a deadbolt on his apartment door. One day, he picked up the newspaper and saw a story about the murder of the girl who had lived next door. It said that the police were still investigating and the murderer was still on the loose. That night, the young man woke up to the sound of groaning. It seemed to be coming from the apartment next door. He was puzzled. The apartment had been vacant ever since the murder. There was still police tape on the apartment door. Try as he might to convince himself it wasn't so, the sound was definitely coming from next door. Curiosity got the better of him and he couldn't resist. He had to take a peek. With trembling hands, he removed the paper from the hole in the wall and looked through the peephole. At first, he didn't see a thing. He waited for his eyes to adjust to the darkness, but he still couldn't make out anything. He couldn't even hear the strange groaning sound anymore. Only an eerie silence. Then, just as he began to move away from the hole in the wall, he saw something. Staring back at him, through the small hole was a wide-open bloodshot eye. The young man recoiled in horror. The hideous unblinking eye stared at him as he crouched on the floor, frozen in fear. Then, the silence was broken by a woman's raspy voice hissing, "I know you saw." Mannequin. There was a man who loved practical jokes. Whenever he played a prank on someone, he would get a great sense of satisfaction from seeing the shocked look on their face. He enjoyed making people scream with fright and almost jump out of their skin in surprise. The man's wife was constantly telling him off. She was tired of his childish pranks and felt he should grow up and behave more responsibly. Nothing she said ever seemed to make the slightest bit of difference, and she generally wound up as the butt of his jokes. As time went by, the man grew bored with the same old practical jokes. His pranks grew more elaborate and daring. He was always looking for ideas for more tricks to play on others. One day, as he was driving to work, he passed by an alleyway beside a large department store. Something caught his eye and he brought the car to a screeching halt. There, lying in a dumpster, was a female mannequin. It was not assembled and the arms and legs were sticking out at odd angles. The man suddenly had a great idea for a prank. He got out of his car and went over to the dumpster. He reached in and pulled the mannequin's head out of the trash. It was in good shape. Apart from a scratch on the nose and a few other dents, the mannequin looked almost lifelike. Working quickly, before anyone spotted him, he gathered the arms, legs, and torso and loaded them into the boot of his car. He spent the day in his office, plotting his next great prank. He was so excited, he couldn't wait to pull it off. That evening, he drove home, ate dinner with his wife and son, then excused himself and went to bed early. The next morning, at 6 a.m., his alarm went off. He shut it off quickly, so as not to wake his wife and son. The house was completely silent as he quietly crept downstairs and let himself into the garage. Opening the boot of his car, he unloaded the pieces of the mannequin and propped them against the wall. Then, the man searched through some old boxes and pulled out a dark, hooded robe and a demonic face mask. He laid the limbs of the dummy out on the floor and assembled it carefully, screwing the arms and legs into the torso. Finally, he screwed the head on tightly and dressed the mannequin in the dark robe and mask. He proceeded to pick it up and carry it into the house. He made his way upstairs, careful not to make any noise, and opened his son's bedroom door. In the dim light, he could see his son lying in bed, fast asleep. The man cautiously placed the mannequin beside his son's bed. He took a few steps back to marvel at his mischievous creation. He was pleased, but the mannequin seemed to be lacking something. It wasn't quite as scary as he had imagined. Just then, it came to him. He crept downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed a large steak knife from the drawer. Going back upstairs, he placed the sharp knife in the mannequin's hand and posed its arm as if it were bringing the knife down in a stabbing motion. He once again eyed his creation and had to put his hand over his mouth to stop the laughter. He could just his son's reaction when he woke up and saw the frightening mannequin standing over him, poised to strike. It would be his greatest prank yet. Brimming with anticipation, he tiptoed downstairs and made himself a cup of coffee. Later that morning, the man was sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast when his wife came in and said good morning. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table beside him. He had a smug look on his face. His son would be waking up any minute now. He could hardly wait. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream broke the silence and his wife dropped her coffee cup. She was about to run up the stairs when she was stopped by her husband's laughter. "What's so funny?" she asked, rather angrily. "It looks like our son has fallen victim to my latest prank," the man chuckled contentedly. His wife rolled her eyes and returned to her chair. They sat in the kitchen, waiting for their son to come downstairs, but after 5 minutes of silence, they both grew impatient. "Would you please check on him?" asked his wife. "He'll be late for school." The man smiled and walked upstairs. He opened his son's door and looked inside. Suddenly, he froze and all color drained from his face. His son lay on his bed. Blood pooled around his shoulders. His throat had been slit from ear to ear. The window was wide open, the curtains fluttered in the breeze, and the robe and mask lay on the floor. The mannequin was nowhere to be seen.